Thank you, Marion. We appreciate that, getting us to this stage so beautifully. Well, tonight's drosha is a very famous one. Many of you know the story, and it's called Schelach Lechah. It's also shortened to Schelach. And it's the Hebrew word to send, but the emphasis, it's not, uh, Hashem didn't say to Moses, send the spies. He said, send for you, which we'll be discussing tomorrow, because that's very important. Send for yourself 12 spies to assess the promised land. So that's basically the heart of this parasha, but it's also about the commandments that once they get there, that they about the sacrifices and how they to treat themselves, and a beautiful portion we'll share tomorrow, how they should treat the strangers, because of course there are going to be people living in this land who didn't oppose them and who will be integrated into their community. What I thought I would do tonight, though, is mention something that's very rarely mentioned, and that is the character of Moses and his leadership. I didn't find this anywhere in my investigations, but all the different parashas I'll be sharing with you tomorrow. But one thing struck me, that here once more we see the most extraordinary example of leadership. And I can understand why Moses is considered the greatest poet that ever, the greatest prophet that ever lived. Because once more the people, as with the golden calf, when the spies get back and 10 of them say, it's no good, we can never conquer this land, it's impossible, and 2 say yes, the people grumble and murmur and get very upset. We'll read that from Torah. And Hashem, God, let me say God, loses his cool totally, and actually says to Moses, I've had enough of these people. That's it. Either I'm going to send a plague and destroy them all and finished. And he says to Moses, but I tell you what, I will make you the father of your own great nation. And let me just read these few words to you tonight from the Torah. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will these people despise me? I'm going to smite them with the pestilence and destroy them all. But you, he says to Moses, I will make you the father of another nation, even greater. Now, what leader could resist that? Very few. I cannot think of one today, perhaps Zelensky. And this is what Moses says, and I'll just paraphrase it to save time. Moses says, please, God, don't do this to the people. Forgive them. Exactly as he did after the golden calf. Please give them another chance. But as you and I know, God did give the people another chance. But because of the 40 days that the spies were away, and because 10 of these great princes came back, wise men princes, and said it's impossible, God then says to Moses, fine, for each of those 40 days, they will wander 40 years in the desert. The parasha actually says, the commentary says 38 because they'd already been there a couple of years. But so 40 years they're going to wander in the desert. Now, I thought what an extraordinary conversation that God is depicted in such a human way that he lost his cool. He even wanted to destroy all of them on sight, even though he'd already, intimated that that would never happen. And he offers Moses this great, great chance of leading up his own nation. And I thought that is very, very typical of our Torah in the stories it tells, that even our God is shown as we are created in his image. So he has some of the attributes of even losing his cool. And Moses is always there representing humanity to say, wait, what will the Egyptians think if you destroy all these people? He didn't even consider what God had said to him about leading his own nation. And as he had said before with the commandments, what will the Egyptians, what will the world think of you, that you're going back on your promise and you're destroying these people? Aren't you a God of compassion? Aren't you a God of forgiveness? Now, I thought this was the most extraordinary conversation to be portrayed between our God and his own prophet. And I thought maybe there's another analogy for us to understand there. If God is indeed all of nature, which he is, and if we abuse nature as we have, and as you know, we've now gone through the pandemic, God knows what still will come, but it's our fault. And if now we are watching a leader abuse his people and go completely against the Torah laws, then if God is indeed nature, isn't this unbelievable conversation? And I'd like you to go and read it. Unbelievable conversation between God and Moses, showing us that humanity has the ability to act according to the laws and to stop the horrible pestilence that God was threatening, or the tsunami or whatever. It is not a question of vengeance. It is a question of nature. And indeed, if Hashem is in charge of all nature, this is telling us that he has made us to be his partners in his image, that we can stop this by how we treat each other and how we treat other people, and most importantly, how we treat nature. I found this conversation to be extraordinary. There are just two other things I'd like to as well share with you tonight, which I thought was very beautiful. And I found a magnificent comment, because also in this parasha is the instructions to wear the tzitzit. And so I found a beautiful, beautiful commentary by a Rabbi Adi Cohen, and I thought I must share this with you. And it says, the title is "You Are Royalty." And he says how he watched, and we all did, the Queen of England on TV. I presume he's in the UK, this rabbi. Always meticulous in her appearance, always conducting herself with grace, always inspiring, always aware that she is representing something bigger than herself, her nation. So should we. In olden days, listen to this, in ancient time, tying knots on the fringes of one garment was a status symbol signifying royalty and high class. So that is a quote from Jacob Milgrom on Hems and Tassels Biblical Archaeological Review. So we see now that has come down to us as Jews during Shabbat in a service, when we put on the beautiful prayer shawl, as it's called in English, or tzitzit. So we are all a kingdom of priests, because even in the greatest disaster, the destruction of both our temples and the second temple, in that destruction and disaster lay the beginning of democracy coming out, as then we are instructed to be a nation of priests. And we might as well also be talking about humanity. We are a nation, we are a humanity in co-creation with Hashem. And out of every disaster which we cause comes an ability, as I've said so many times, to achieve something. And the disaster of the loss of our temples was the beginning then of our having to assume that responsibility as a nation or as a humanity, and the beginning of an unfolding democracy, which is still unfolding. So let's see exactly what he says. The light blue thread that Marion already mentioned in one of our readings tonight, that is part of your prayer shawl or tzitzit, was also associated in those days with royalties. In Shemot, we learned that the high priest wore a completely blue garment, kalat tchelet. In the book of Esther, we read that in the king's palace, Mordechai was dressed in blue gowns. So in this aspect, the tzitzit links us to our past and reminds us that we belong to a prestigious peoplehood, Israel. So, whilst most of us only wear this talit during religious service, and less often daily, unless we're doing a daily prayer, let us remember that whether we wear it or not, to act in that manner, that we represent Hashem, we represent the goodness of the world. And I really think that applies to everyone. Judaism can be defined in many ways. However we choose to define our faith, ethics, beliefs, they need to be translated and displayed in our everyday activity. That's when the laws of Torah, because our Torah, if you want to call it a religion, is a book of laws which underpins the whole of an evolving democracy, which is still very young and making a lot of mistakes and still always correcting itself. But let us remember that it is our interactions and our day-to-day actions with the world all day, every day. So the tzitzit is to remind us, just like the Queen of England, we need to conduct ourselves with grace. We need to inspire others and to take pride in our heritage and the heritage of humanity. Then we represent something bigger than ourselves. So I would just like to say Shabbat Shalom with these words. And it's also from a lovely Rabbi Zach Shapiro, who actually came to us as a young intern, I think in 2008 or 9. He did the High Holy Days at our shul, and today he is at a big, wonderful synagogue in Culver City. And he says that each of us, whether it's each of us individually, whether it's a congregation, whether it's the world, whether it's democracy, whether it's justice, it's all a work in progress. And he refers to this beautiful prayer that we recite each night in Judaism called Ma'ariv Aravim. And it teaches us that God rolls the light into darkness and then the darkness into light. And perhaps, may I just conclude by saying, that is the story of you, me, every man, every woman, everyone's life. There'll be good times, there'll be times of light, and there'll be times of dark. And it is in times of the dark that you and I, with how we treat each other, with still having faith and hope, that as they did in the desert, even though the people didn't want to go, they didn't believe, they wanted to go back to Egypt, and they had to wander for 40 years. God already started planning with Moses to teach them what they would do in the promised land. 40 years still away. And that's how you and I must be. Whether it be in times of light or darkness, don't ever lose faith in your dreams, your goals, and the goals of the Jewish nation and humanity, and that is to live in peace, to live in fulfillment, and to see that each human being, no matter what creed, color, religion, sex, background, ultimately we is treated as equals. Shabbat Shalom.